The Viralis drifted silently through the cold expanse between stars, its once proud hull now dimmed to emergency lighting. Once a diplomatic envoy, it now floated powerless in a forgotten pocket of space. Aboard, the air was growing thin. Systems that hummed with confidence just days before had begun to fail, one by one. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez adjusted the collar of her uniform, sticky with sweat despite the dropping temperature. The climate controls had gone down 2 days ago, and the air recyclers weren't far behind. She crouched beside a console, fingers deep in its wiring, guided by a small beam of light strapped to her head. Beside her, Omar Bell, the ship systems engineer, held a toolkit and passed her components with a quiet urgency. Still no signal received? Ava asked, not looking up. Omar shook his head. No response, not even static. The beacons, too weak or were too far out? Ava exhaled. It wasn't just the silence, it was the absence of any trace that made it feel personal, as if the entire galaxy had turned its back on them. In the command lounge, the remaining diplomats and crew sat in a loose circle. Their conversations had become shorter, quieter. Each species spoke in hushed tones to their own, wary of everyone else. Kelrin, the senior Sarati envoy, stood near the viewport, his long tail still. His golden eyes scanned the stars, watching for movement that never came. He turned as Ava entered. Lieutenant Ramirez, has there been progress? We're trying to extend the beacon's range. Omar's got an idea, using some of the long-range sensors. Kelrin gave a slow, skeptical nod. Your efforts are ... commendable. But you must know without propulsion or comms, our odds are low. Our odds are better than nothing. Ava replied calmly, and we're not giving up. A ripple of emotion passed through the group, some admiration, some frustration. One of the Thal scientists, a being of soft blue tones and cloud-like skin, closed its many eyes and sighed. We were assured the Zadrak escorts would return. The Thal murmured. They promised to safeguard this mission. They promised. A lot, Omar said as he entered behind Ava, brushing dust from his jacket. And yet, here we are. Ava took a breath and stepped forward. Look, we all have reasons to be angry, but none of that gets us home. What matters now is pulling together and using what we have. And what do we have? Asked Farrell, the Dralvani observer, his voice sharp. We have a frozen deck, 6 days of oxygen, and a broken ship. Omar stepped in. We also have a subspace transmitter, barely functioning, but still salvageable. I'm going to reroute the signal through the navigational dish, boost the range using the array. It's experimental, risky, but it might work, Ava added. If there's even one ship listening on the old Earth defense bands, we might get through. Kelrin looked at them both, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he spoke again. You humans. You always act like someone will come, like you're never truly alone. Ava met his gaze without hesitation, because someone usually does. With no further words, she turned and walked back toward engineering. Omar followed, already scribbling calculations on a datapad. Hours later, the darkened bay where auxiliary systems still flickered, the two humans worked under faint lights and rising fatigue. Cables snaked across the floor. Makeshift power. Cells hummed softly. Finally, Omar flipped the last switch. Ava leaned in and pressed the manual trigger. The beacon pulsed once. Then again, no answer. Just the quiet hum of equipment. Omar rubbed his face. That's it. Now we wait. Ava sat back against a bulkhead, eyes on the stars outside the viewing port. She whispered, as much to herself as to the void. Come on, someone out there has to be listening. Somewhere far beyond known star lanes, past the rim of controlled space, the HSS Dawnbreaker glided through the darkness on silent power. a patchwork ship long retired from official service. It was a relic of the past, modified, repurposed, and kept alive by the loyalty of its crew and the quiet resolve of its captain. Captain Elias Rourke sat alone in the observation deck, watching the stars through a hexagonal pane of glass stained with time. He didn't trust many things anymore, not since the peace accords fell apart, not since orders stopped making sense. He sipped from a steaming mug and glanced at the silent console. Beside him, then, without warning, the silence cracked. A blinking light. One rarely used. He set his cup down slowly. The encrypted subspace receiver hummed softly. Narrowband channel from a pre-collapse emergency frequency. Human-made, outdated, abandoned by most. Rourke tapped the console. And a voice filtered through. The static distorted but unmistakable. "This is Lieutenant Ava Ramirez. Diplomatic vessel Viralis. Systems compromised. Abandoned. Oxygen reserves critical. Crew includes multiple allied species, requesting any available assistance. Please respond." The message looped once, then stopped. Rourke sat still. He hadn't heard Ava Ramirez's name in years. She had been a rising Staracom presence in the chaos of interstellar diplomacy, respected even beyond Earth. The thought of her stranded, forgotten by the very systems that once praised her, stirred something deep in him. A chime sounded. Behind him, Commander Lian Yao, his second in command, entered the room with her arms crossed and expression guarded. "We picked it up too," she said quietly. "Signals weak, but real. Encrypted using Earthfleet's secondary diplomatic matrix. Someone knew how to bury it just deep enough," Rourke muttered. Lian leaned against the bulkhead. "Coordinates place them in a neutral zone, close to Zadrak territory." "Of course it does," he said. "There's a risk, it's bait. There's a bigger risk, it's not," Rourke replied. He stood and faced her. "Plot a course. Quiet approach. We get in close enough to confirm, then decide how loud we need to be." Lian studied him. "You think it's really her?" "I do." Meanwhile, aboard the Viralis, time was thinning like the recycled air. The improvised signal had been transmitted on a schedule to pulses every half hour, followed by 20 minutes of silence to conserve power. The crew took turns monitoring the quiet signal room, each rotation more subdued than the last. Ava returned to the room near the end of her shift, hoping for anything. Just a blip, a tone. But the console remained silent. She sat down anyway, brushing frost from the screen. Her breath left a faint cloud in the air. Omar arrived moments later, with 2 cups of heated water, precious rations, carefully stretched. He handed her one and took the seat beside her. "Any change?" he asked. Ava shook her head. "Nothing yet. They might have picked it up. Maybe." The lights flickered once, then twice. A warning. Energy was being rationed in timed bursts. After the next cycle, only life support in 2 central corridors would remain active. Ava stared out the narrow viewing slit. It was like searching the sky for a lantern too far, too dim, and too fragile. Still, she spoke softly, "If there's even one human ship still out there, they'll come." Omar smiled faintly. "You always say that, because it's still true." At that exact moment, across thousands of light years, the Dawnbreaker accelerated out of silent drift and into jump sequence. The stars shifted, and the ship vanished into the jump corridor with a soundless hum. On the other side of the void, hope had just begun to move. The HSS Dawnbreaker emerged from jump space in a cloud of distorted light. Its hull shimmered as energy dissipated, and internal systems rebalanced themselves. The crew moved swiftly through the ship's corridors, their steps steady but laced. With urgency, Captain Elias Rourke stood at the central operations console. Arms behind his back, watching as holographic charts filled the air around him. The signal from the Viralis was now stronger, though still faint and stuttering. "Are we picking up any nearby ships, Ks?" "Passive scans only," Commander Lian Yo replied from her station. "Nothing on active radar, but there's residual warp trail activity." Zadrak signature. 3 ships. Possibly cruisers. "They left the region 2 hours ago. Strange place for a Zadrak patrol," Rourke murmured, "especially if they're not responding to distress calls." Lian tapped into the data cluster and extracted a fragment from the beacon's repeating signal. Her brow furrowed. There's something embedded in the frequency, almost like a second transmission layered beneath the main call. Rourke moved closer. Encrypted. Yes. Human code. One of the older fleet diplomatic locks. Buried just deep enough that a casual scan wouldn't notice it. "Show me." Moments later, the hidden message appeared, clipped and corrupted in parts. But still readable. Mission sabotage confirmed. Life support critically compromised. Suspect intentional abandonment by Zadrak escorts. Diplomatic passengers include Sarati, Dralvani, Thal, and 2 human officers. Request extraction before atmospheric failure. Lian straightened, alarm rising. Behind her composed expression. They weren't just left behind. They were left on purpose. Rourke's voice was steady, but there was steel behind his words. Someone didn't want that mission to succeed. Or didn't want witnesses coming back. He nodded, then looked at the navigation map. "Bring us in closer. Quiet engines. I want full visual confirmation of the Viralis." "What this?" "Message says is true. We're not just dealing with a rescue. We're walking into the middle of something bigger." On the Viralis, the air was thinner now, tinged with the scent of recycled plastic and failing machinery. The corridor lights had dimmed to emergency glow strips, casting long shadows across metal walls. Kelrin stood near the central gathering space. Watching Omar adjust a battered pressure valve, the Sarati envoy had spent most of his life navigating tense political landscapes, but this felt different. The silence, the helplessness, the way the humans kept working long after others had given up. "You truly believe someone is coming?" Kelrin asked. Omar didn't look up. Belief doesn't matter. Action does, even when the odds say otherwise. Omar gave a tired smile. "Especially then?" Kelrin tilted his head. "I've observed your kind often. You seem to act as though someone will always come through. It is almost illogical." Omar finally looked at him. "It's not about logic. It's about not quitting until the last switch flips off." The Sarati said nothing more, but his gaze lingered. On the human longer than before. Elsewhere, Ava crouched beside the youngest passenger on board a Thal youth, no more than 15 cycles old. The child shivered under a thermal blanket, wide eyes searching hers for assurance. Ava spoke gently. "We're not alone. Help is on the way." The child nodded, just once. A faint chirp sounded from the adjacent panel. "Ah!" Ava turned quickly, her pulse rising. The signal repeater blinked just once, then again. Omar's voice came from across the corridor. "That's a reply pulse." Ava stood, hope igniting in her chest. They heard us. Then another light on the panel began to blink. Not just a reply. A ship was approaching, far above, unseen but drawing closer with every second. The Dawnbreaker powered forward, weapons offline, shields at standby. Its crew ready. Its captain silent and focused. Help wasn't just coming, it was almost here. The stars outside the Viralis remained unchanged, cold and distant. But in the control bay, the air felt different charged. The signal receiver pulsed steadily now, repeating a confirmation code. Someone had heard them. Someone was responding. Ava leaned over the console, double-checking the signal integrity. "They're real," she said aloud, almost not believing it. "And they're coming." Omar tapped. On the secondary monitor, based on signal delay and triangulation, they're less than 4 hours out, maybe less, if they've got jump precision. Kelrin approached, arms folded. "Can you confirm who it is?" "Human ship, no doubt," Omar replied. "The encryption's fleet grade, but the signature doesn't match anything in the registry." Ava's brow furrowed. "Wait, if it's not in the registry, ... It's off-grid," Omar said. "Unofficial." Kelrin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You mean a rogue vessel?" "Or a forgotten one," Ava said, her voice quiet. "There was a ship, once HSS Dawnbreaker, operated under an old peacekeeping charter. Last seen 5 years ago. Decommissioned." Kelrin asked. "No, it just disappeared." The alien envoy studied her thoughtfully. "And you believe it has returned now, after all this time, for you?" "For all of us," Ava replied. Aboard the Dawnbreaker, the approaching shape of the Viralis emerged on screen, a pale silhouette against the velvet backdrop of deep space. Its lights were dim, its hull scarred. Captain Rourke stood silent for a long moment, then leaned forward. "Status. No comes from the vessel, but beacon confirms 15 life signs," Leanne reported. "Minimal power. Structural integrity, failing in rear sections. Looks like one stabilizer's blown. Any other ships nearby?" Leanne frowned. "Negative. But I'm still getting trace energy pattern Zedrak jump signatures recent within 12 hours. Rourke looked at the tactical display. "Could be there circling back, watching to see what happens, or waiting for the Viralis to fail." Rourke stepped back. "Then we make sure it doesn't." He turned to the comms officer. "Broadcast on fleet diplomatic channels. This is Captain Elias Rourke of the independent vessel Dawnbreaker. We are initiating rescue of the stranded diplomatic convoy Viralis. Any interference will be met with response proportional to intent. Keep the message on loop." The officer hesitated. "Sir, that's going to get us noticed." "Good," Rourke said. "I want whoever left them there to know we're not sneaking in." On board the Viralis, lights flickered as another circuit panel failed in the hallway. Omar slammed the emergency breaker down just in time to stop a cascade overload. 3 systems just dropped, he reported. "We're losing whole segments." "Now, how long do we have?" Ava asked. "Maybe 2 hours before the core shuts itself down." Before she could reply, Kelrin stepped forward from the shadows. "We need to consider abandoning the ship." A hush fell across the group. "There are only 3 escape pods," the Drovani delegate added. "They won't carry everyone." "No one's getting left behind," Ava said firmly. "But if we do nothing," Kelrin warned, "none of us make it." She met his gaze. "They're close. We hold the line. You want to give up 5 minutes before rescue arrives. That's not how humans operate." The others said nothing, but some stood straighter. Even the youngest among them seemed to listen. Then the bridge lights blinked once. A slow, golden pulse. Omar stared at the screen. "It's a scanner ping. They've locked onto us." Ava smiled, relief breaking through the exhaustion on her face. "They found us." Far above, the Dawnbreaker came into range. Drone bays opened, and small craft deployed, unarmed but equipped with stabilizers, oxygen modules, and medical supplies. The rescue had begun. Rourke watched the operation from his command chair. Quiet and focused. "Let's bring them home," he said simply. And in the silence of space, the stars seemed to shift. Not from movement, but from hope. The first rescue drone latched onto the Viralis with a soft thud, its magnetic clamps holding firm against the weakened hull. From the corridor outside the central gathering room, a dull vibration passed through the deck plates like the hum of distant thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ava's voice cut through the silence. "They're here." The group stirred. Some gasped. Others whispered quietly in their native tongues. The atmosphere shifted, not all at once, but slowly, as if the weight pressing on everyone's chest had begun to lift. Omar wiped his hands on his sleeve, stepped to the nearest terminal, and opened a channel to the airlock. Drone 1 has connected. Stabilizer active. Oxygen recharging. Kelrin stepped beside Ava and spoke in a low voice. "You were right. Someone did come." Ava didn't take her eyes off the status screen. It wasn't faith, it was choice. We keep showing up for each other, or we lose everything. Outside, more drones approached the Viralis one to each airlock. Each carried emergency life support modules and heat shields. Some were equipped with stabilizing arms to support the failing structure. From the Dawnbreaker, shuttle teams launched piloted by crew who had volunteered without hesitation. Inside the Dawnbreaker's main shuttle bay, Lieutenant Ren Harrow checked the seals on his suit and gave a thumbs up to his boarding team. As the hatch began to lower, he caught sight of the wrecked shape of the Viralis ahead, barely holding together. Its rear section visibly buckled. Docking in 60 seconds, the pilot called out. Ren keyed his comm. "Captain, we're going." From the bridge, Captain Rourke's voice came through, steady as ever. "Do what you have to. Get them all." Back on the Viralis, systems failed in quick succession. The artificial gravity faltered, lights dimmed to almost nothing, and warning. Tones echoed through the corridors. Omar held onto the panel, reading the cascading errors. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before the main core shuts down. After that, no gravity, no heat, no breathable air." Ava turned to the gathered diplomats and survivors. "Evac teams are coming through the forward docking corridor. Stay close, stay calm, and move only when directed." Kelrin nodded. "My people will assist." The first shuttle docked. The doors hissed open, and human rescuers stepped through, distributing oxygen packs and thermal blankets, guiding the weakest out, first beginning with the injured Thal and the Dralvani youth. Ava helped an older Saruan ambassador into a harness, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. "You're going to be okay. The shuttle has pressure support." The alien blinked slowly. "You said someone would come." She smiled faintly. "They always do." Inside the Dawnbreaker, the rescued were greeted by Med Team's humans and aliens working together. There were no interviews, no interrogations, only care. Warm air, food paste, clean water, and relief in the main corridor. Kelrin stood beside a viewing window, watching the Viralis from afar as its lights flickered, like a dying ember. He turned to Omar, who stood nearby. Tools still clipped to his belt. "You knew how close we were to losing everything," the Sarati said. Omar gave a nod. "That's why we didn't stop. You humans, ... you don't give up easily." Omar gave a small smile. "That's probably what got us into half our problems." Perhaps, Kelrin replied, "but it's what got us out of this one." Once the last group boarded the shuttles, Ava was the final to leave. She paused just inside the airlock, looking back at the broken corridors behind her. She reached up and gently placed her hand against the wall, or a goodbye, then a farewell. Then, she turned, stepped into the shuttle, and sealed the hatch. As the Dawnbreaker pulled away, the Viralis drifted silently. No longer a vessel, but a memory of survival, betrayal, and the unshakable will to endure. Ava sat beside Omar in the recovery bay. She glanced at him, exhausted but calm. "We made it," she said. He nodded. "Thanks to them." She looked toward the bridge. Toward the humans who had risked everything to answer a call no one else had. "No," she said quietly. "Thanks. To all of us. The Dawnbreaker cruised at sublight speed, far from any known patrol lanes. The stars beyond the viewport gleamed steadily, uncaring. As if the drama that had unfolded hours ago was too small to matter, but for the survivors on board. Everything had changed in the medical bay. Low voices murmured between species that had only days ago stood as cautious allies. The rescued crew of the Viralis rested on padded recovery beds, oxygen masks removed, hydration drips slowly replenishing what they'd lost. They were safe, alive, and for the first time since the mission began, they had time to think. Ava Ramirez stood at a narrow table in the ship's briefing room, reviewing data logs. Omar sat nearby, sorting fragments of corrupted telemetry and ship records. Kelrin paced behind them, arms tucked behind his back, his scaled brow furrowed with thought. Here, Omar said, pointing to a highlighted cluster of code. This block confirms a manual override of the propulsion lock. The Viralis didn't drift into failure. Someone shut it down. Ava leaned in. Which deck? Engineering right before we entered the neutral zone. The command came from Maze, one of the Zadrak escort ships, via direct uplink. Kelrin stopped pacing. So it's confirmed. Sabotage. And coordinated, Ava added. They disabled our power, blocked transmissions, and made sure we were just outside any standard patrol range. If the beacon hadn't reached the Dawnbreaker, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Kelrin S.'s voice was low, steady. This wasn't a failure of communication. It was a decision to erase witnesses. Omar exhaled slowly. We can prove it. The logs are damaged, but not lost. And your testimonies, all of you, will back it. We can send this to the Galactic Consulate, Ava said. Not through the official channels. They might already be compromised. But there are people who'll listen. Kelrin nodded. I will speak for the Sarati Council. And the Drauvani ambassador is already preparing a statement. We'll go wide, Ava added. Multiple systems, multiple factions. No one can bury it if everyone hears it at once. Omar turned toward the window. What if they try to discredit us? They will, Kelrin replied. But if humans hadn't shown up, there'd be no one left to question. On the Dawnbreaker's bridge, Captain Elias Rourke listened. Quietly, as Lian Yao outlined their growing problem. The signal we broadcast during the rescue was picked up by at least 4 listening posts. No direct response yet, but we've had pings from neutral relay hubs. Someone's watching us now. Good, Rourke said. Let them. Leon hesitated. You know what this means? We're not just an old ship in deep space anymore. Puts us back in the middle of the map. He looked out at the stars. That map forgot about people. Maybe it's time it remembered. He walked to the comms panel, activated a direct channel. Ramirez, Kelrin, report to the bridge. Let's get this story into orbit. 2 hours later, a broad-spectrum transmission launched from the Dawnbreaker, bouncing off signal relays, trade stations, and diplomatic satellites across the outer systems. It was not encrypted. It was not classified. It was truth. The message included voice logs, recovered data, witness testimony, and the emergency call that had been ignored by every official frequency except one, a forgotten human distress band. Ava's voice, clear and steady, ended the message. When we were abandoned, we had no reason to believe help would come. But it did. Not from the systems that promised protection, but from people who chose to act. We are alive not because of policy, but because someone still believed we mattered. Let this serve as a record. We did not fall silent. We were heard. Across the galaxy, terminals blinked. Screens lit up. From warships and border stations to quiet homes and neutral forums, the message reached people who had stopped believing. In rescue, and somewhere deep in a government chamber, someone whispered they weren't supposed to survive, but they had. And now, The galaxy knew it. In the hours following the transmission, the galaxy rippled with unrest. On neutral forums and independent newsnets, Ava's voice echoed across star systems, replayed in dozens of languages and dialects. The imagery of the broken Veralis, the exhausted survivors, and the calm clarity of the message struck a chord with beings across species lines. It wasn't just a diplomatic crisis. Now it was personal. The Dawnbreaker floated near the edge of a binary system, running dark again. Rourke had ordered all active scans turned off. They'd done what they came to do. Now they watched, in the ship's mess hall. A quiet hum of conversation floated in the air. The Veralis crew mingled with the Dawnbreaker's team. Saratis sat beside humans. Thal offered nutrient packs to Dravani. There was no ceremony, only shared breath and the soft relief of still being alive. Ava sipped rehydrated coffee at a corner table while scanning updates on a shared datapad. Omar sat beside her, scrolling through the message traffic coming from across the known systems. He let out a low whistle. Look at this. 3 independent stations have issued formal inquiries to the Zadrak Coalition. The Dralvani have suspended diplomatic contact pending review. And that? Ava asked, pointing to another headline. Omar's eyes scanned the screen. A Sarati colony in the Sarin Belt has offered asylum to any Veralis survivor who wants it. They're calling the sabotage an act of political treachery. Ava leaned back in her seat. It's not revolution. Not yet. But the cracks are showing. On the Dawnbreaker's bridge, Rourke and Leanne watched a new broadcast, this one from the Zadrak themselves. A tall, pale-skinned official spoke with practiced calm behind a transparent podium. We regret the tragic loss of control on the diplomatic vessel Veralis. Our investigation confirms that system malfunctions caused a misinterpretation of navigational orders. We continue to support our diplomatic allies and will offer compensation to all affected parties. Rourke muted the screen. Textbook denial, Leanne said. No blame. No admission. They're trying to get ahead of this. This won't work. Rourke replied. Not this time. He turned to her. Has the Thal response come in yet? Leanne tapped her console. Yes, quiet, but firm. They've called for an emergency session of the Tri-Council. That made Rourke pause. The Tri-Council hasn't been called in 5 years, he said. Last time was the Sorowan mining collapse. Leanne nodded. It's real now. This isn't about just one ship anymore. In a private room just off the medical bay, Kelrin stood before a wide viewing screen. A Dralvani delegate appeared on the screen. One of the few survivors from another mission years ago that had similarly vanished without explanation. Your survival has changed everything, the delegate said. We always suspected interference. But now, the proof is irrefutable. Alren inclined his head. Then act. Speak. The time for waiting is over. We will. The Sarati too, I assume. We already have, Kelrin replied. The alliance built on silence is unraveling. And perhaps that's not a tragedy. Later, Ava joined Rourke. On the Dawnbreaker's observation deck, for the first time in days, there was quiet. No alarms, no systems failing. Just stars, steady and infinite. They're listening, she said. Some of them, Rourke replied. It's a start. He turned to her. You know what this means, don't you? That they'll come looking for us, she said. That? We've made enemies. That, he nodded. And that we've also given others a reason to stand up. She watched the stars for a long moment. They tried to erase us, but instead, we lit a beacon. Rourke gave a rare smile. And? Once you lighted others, start lighting their own. The galaxy wasn't stable anymore. It was awakening, the Dawnbreaker. Drifted gently in orbit around the neutral system of Alisara, a shimmering cluster of twin suns casting warm light across the hull. The ship had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of defiance. Inside the command center, Captain Elias Rourke stood alongside Ava Ramirez, Kelrin, Omar, and the other surviving diplomats. Their faces were tired but determined. The transmission that had rocked the galaxy now fueled their next move. Rourke addressed the group, voice calm but resolute. "We've shattered the silence. We've shown what happens when you abandon hope and turn your back on allies. But now the real work begins. This isn't just about justice. It's about rebuilding trust." Ava nodded. Trust between species, factions, even between individuals who once doubted one another. "We were all left to perish, yet here we are, standing together." Kelrin stepped forward. "The Serati Council has voted to open diplomatic relations with the fleet once more, under new terms. We want transparency, accountability." Number? More shadows. No more silent betrayals. Omar added, "The Dralvani delegate will propose a joint investigation committee, composed of multiple species independent of any single government. This is about collective security." Rourke's gaze swept over the room. "It's a fragile beginning, but it's ours. And it's powerful." News channels across the systems buzzed with updates. The once quiet corner of space where the Viralis had been left to die was now a rallying point for countless voices demanding change in the bustling corridors of the Dawnbreaker. The diverse crew moved with renewed purpose. Human engineers worked alongside Serati technicians, exchanging tools and techniques. Medical teams from several species shared best practices. Children of mixed heritage played quietly in the common areas, a living testament to unity forged. Through hardship, Ava found herself in the observation lounge, watching the swirling nebulae beyond the viewports. Omar joined her, offering a small, hopeful smile. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked quietly. Omar considered the question. The galaxy has been fractured for centuries. But when you see what happens when hope meets action, it changes everything. She nodded. It started with a ship that shouldn't have come, with people who refused to give up. And now, Omar said, we all stand together. Back on the Dawnbreaker's bridge, Rourke received a secure transmission from the Tri-Council. The message was simple but profound. The Galactic Charter has been amended to include the Viralis Accord, a binding treaty that guarantees protection for all diplomatic missions, regardless of origin or affiliation. Sabotage and abandonment will be met with collective response. Rourke allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't just a win for those rescued, it was a step toward a better future. Prepare to relay the message. He said to Lian Yao, "This is more than a rescue. It's a new chapter." Months later, as the Dawnbreaker charted a course toward the core systems, the once broken crew gathered for a ceremony in the ship's central hall. Diplomatic envoys, military officers, and civilians alike stood shoulder to shoulder. Ava spoke first, her voice strong and clear. "We were left to perish among the stars. But humanity's ship came, not as saviors alone, but as partners. Together, we faced the darkness, and together, we built a light that no shadow could extinguish." Kelrin stepped forward. "Let this be a testament. Unity born of adversity is stronger than any force that seeks to divide us. Our futures are intertwined." Omar smiled as the crowd erupted in quiet applause, not for victory alone, but for hope reborn. In the quiet moments after the ceremony, Rourke looked out across the crowd. The Dawnbreaker was more than a ship, now it was a symbol. A symbol that no one would be left behind again, no matter how far the star stretched, no matter how dark the space between, because humanity stands, and so does everyone else, together.